Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, Chicago Baseball Classics. My name is Julia Borcherts, and my co-host for the evening is the amazing Billy Lombardo.
I don't know about amazing, but I'm Billy Lombardo for sure.
Yes, he
Julia, it's
is.
great. It's great to see you. I want to start by saying that I freaked out a little bit today when I read a tweet from someone that said that Tony La Russa stepped down as the White Sox manager, and it was going to be replaced by Renteria, who was the manager last year. And then I realized it was not only opening day, but it was April Fool's. So I'm getting ready for anyone. And then a friend of mine said that he just became a writer for the Stephen Colbert Show, and I was like ready to hate him. And then I realized it was April Fool's again.
Also,
I fell for it twice today. So none of that is going to happen tonight.
well, in the Cubs, we wish the Cubs had done a little bit better for opening day today, but there's always Saturday. They'll be back. And the Sox will be playing tonight out in California where it's sunnier and they won't be beset by the frostbite that I am blaming for the Cubs' loss earlier today. But we're excited to celebrate opening day with everyone together. And you know how exciting it is. I was so happy to see people back in the stands at Wrigley Field. They're doing like careful safety protocols. So there was 25% capacity, I believe. Only 10,000 people. And something that they did that was really nice, they invited 600 fully vaccinated frontline healthcare workers, essential workers, to be in the, and invited them to spend the day in the bleachers, you know, watching the game today. So that was really exciting and heartwarming, you know, to see that. And then they were honored special t-shirts, and there was like a moment of recognition for them.
Great.
So yeah, it was pretty fabulous. And you know, like the healthcare heroes, you know, who doesn't want to see them?
It's also nice that the White Sox were ahead of the curve with this only 25% capacity business. For a long time, we've been doing that. So I think this may be a possible year that we're going to possibly match the Cubs attendance.
Yeah,
so I'm excited about that.
They already have that perfected. Yes. Oh.
So Julie, do you want to start by talking a little bit about the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, and then I'll go into the Chicago Classics?
Sure. So the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame was founded in 2008 to honor, celebrate, preserve, and promote the development of Chicago's great literary heritage, past, present, and future. And this is achieved through such projects as educational programming, awards, exhibits, community events such as our event this evening, a Chicago literary map, and an annual induction ceremony.
And the Chicago Classics, I took some liberty with a little bit of a paraphrasing here, but the Chicago Classics is the brainchild of Chicago favorite Rick Cogan and Story Week Festival founder Randy Albers. The mission statement, articulated by Rick Cogan over several whiskeys in the back room of the Billy Goat and paraphrased by me here tonight, reads thusly: we get a whole bunch of people, writers, actors, politicians, bus drivers, pickpockets, scoundrels, and ne'er-do-wells, and have them read their favorite half page of a Chicago book. I added this stuff about pickpockets and scoundrels. Anyway, sometime after Story Week ended, Randy carried Chicago Classics to the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, where he serves as the board president. The Venerable series represents everything at the heart of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame's mission. These short presentations highlight a cross-section of our great literary heritage, past, present, and future. And tonight we've gathered a number of people who are going to read not only from their own work and work that they've had a hand in, but also reading some Chicago classics as well. And Julia and I are going to be our hosts, your hosts, and we're going to do a little bit of a reading ourselves. And I'll start by introducing Julia. Julia Borcherts is a literary publicist with K Publicity and a creative writing instructor at Columbia College, National Louis University, and DePaul University. Her writing about the Cubs and White Sox has been featured in Time Out Chicago, the Chicago Tribune's Red Eye, and Metro Mix, the anthology, and other publications. Julia, it is awesome to see you. And one day we're going to see you in person. I'm sure it's going to happen.
I know. I can't wait for that day. Thank you for that delightful introduction, Billy. And I will introduce Billy Lombardo, who is the author of 3 books of fiction: The Logic of a Rose, Chicago Stories, Morning Will Come, and The Man with Two Arms, a novel about a fictional Major League Baseball switch pitcher, a book that augured the Jumbotron at Wrigley Field. Billy is the 2011 recipient of the Nelson Ogren Award in Fiction. He lives in Chicago, Illinois, with the fabulous Amy Danzer. And yes, she is fabulous. I'm excited to be here tonight with you too, Billy, and with all of us together for this event to celebrate opening day together. So Billy is going to read from a piece that he wrote, and he will introduce that. Go ahead, Billy, take it away. Yeah.
I am going to read a piece called City of Big Soldiers. And I wrote it shortly after the White Sox won the World Series championship in 2005. And at the time, my son was 12 years old. And I just don't know if there's a better age to be when your team wins the World Series. And I had some music with it. My brother put it together, and so I'm going to share my screen with you. Hopefully, this will work, and then I'll share the YouTube video with you. We're going to see if that works. City of Big Soldiers. The day after the Chicago White Sox were crowned World Series champions, there were fresh flowers on the graves of 1,000 Chicago fathers who'd spent 1,000 lives waiting for this day. My father's only sport was work. He didn't give me baseball. My son did. Kane was born a shortstop in 1993, and since that day I've never been to a White Sox game without him. On Kane's 4th birthday, Frank Thomas lined a foul ball that banged around a dozen seats before it rolled under my shoe, and Kane looked at me like I'd just plopped him down on his own pony. All through the game, he kept asking me, "Tell me how I got a baseball in my hands." He turned 12 just before the summer and started keeping a scrapbook when it looked like it might be a special season for the White Sox. Oh, we worried through their losses. We learned how to worry that summer. But we were there when Paulie Konerko hit his 200th home run, and we were there when Joe Creedy went yard in the 10th to beat Cleveland, and we screamed in each other's faces when Tadahito's 3-run shot beat Boston in the American League Division Series. We were pissed at Vladimir Guerrero for littering right field with his finger tape at the only playoff loss. And when I paid more money for a Red Sox game than ever before, I had to tell Kane there was a slim chance the Red Sox could win, and so we had to try not to be sad. But after that Angels game, they never lost. We were watching from home when the White Sox won the American League Championship, and we screamed, and Kane jumped in my arms, and we laughed, and we danced in the bedroom, and then we went outside to scream because our house was too small a thing to scream in. And during the World Series, we kept meticulous score and worried our fingernails to the quick, and in the 9th inning of Game 1, I asked Kane what he was going to do if the White Sox won. "I'm going to cry," he said. "Me too," I said. And during Game 2, I told him I'm also going to scream until my throat bleeds. "Me too," he said. And through those 4 games, we did scream. Through home runs and saves and back-to-back complete games and freaky drop third strikes and grand slams and double plays and walk-off home runs and that 14-inning marathon that I couldn't scream through because everyone was sleeping, we screamed. But when the White Sox won Game 4 of the World Series, we weren't sure what to do. We screamed, of course, because we said we would. And the White Sox, they were screaming too. But then we just stopped screaming. We just stood there in his bedroom in front of the TV and not screaming. We went straight to these crazy smiles and we had to wipe our eyes just to see. I put my arm on Kane's shoulder and we moved closer to the television and he put his arm around me and we stood inches from the TV, smiling and weeping and kind of checking in on each other with the wonder of not screaming. We watched our champions as they looked for new arms to jump in and for new faces to scream in, and the reporters, they looked like strangers crashing a party, and we secretly wished they would just leave our White Sox alone. And I didn't say anything to Kane about this, but something sad came over me. And I wondered if Kane felt it, and I wondered if the White Sox felt it too. And just before he went to sleep that night, I felt I had to say something to him, just in case he was sad, and so I told him the only thing I knew for certain. "You made the season for me, Kano," I said, and he nodded. And you know what else I said? "They did it for us. You know that, don't you?" And he nodded. "They won it for you and me," I said, "and we deserve this," I said. "In the history of the world, we might have been the best fans ever." And he nodded again. "Especially you," I said. "If it weren't for you, I don't think they would have done it." And he nodded again. And I told him that we would be there for the White Sox next year too, and the year after that, and if 88 more years passed and they never came close to the glory of this year, well then we would stand by them like soldiers anyway, I told him, and he nodded because all of it was true. And I kissed him on the forehead and he said, "Sweet dreams, Dad," like he always does. And I said, "Oh, Kane, it really was."
Thank you, Billy. That was beautiful.
Oh, it was a fun year. I can't even read that thing without crying. That's why I had to film it.
I know. I was like very close to tears myself, and I'm not even a White Sox fan. And but I think it's just that beautiful relationship between a parent and a child, and like what it means to have these things happen, these momentous occasions, these little coming of different ages.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yeah, it'll be nice to get back to a baseball game or two this summer. It's been
I
a while.
know. They were saying today on the Cubs broadcast that it has been 557 days since people have been in the ballpark.
Oh my!
I know. Too long. So yeah, I'm hoping that to be able to get back out to a game this summer too. But not today. It was 36 degrees today at first pitch. And that was just too cold for anyone, including apparently Kyle Hendricks. But so next up, I'm very excited to introduce John Freyer, who will be reading from his original work. John is a lifelong Chicagoan, born and raised on the South Side, graduate of Quigley Seminary South, a staunch White Sox fan from the Dick Allen days. As a member of the Society for American Baseball Research, Freyer has penned 4 baseball books through Arcadia Publishing: 19th Century Baseball in Chicago, Chicago Aces, Chicago Sluggers, and Peverelli's National Game, which is about the early development of baseball in New York from 1825 to 1867. Freyer worked as a datacaster and official scorer for Major League Baseball and worked the infamous Bartman game and the White Sox World Series. Now that's a pair of games. His interest in Negro League comes from having met former Negro Leaguers Double Duty Radcliffe, Hank Presswood, and Al Spearman while working with the Chicago Baseball Museum. Please join me in welcoming John Freyer.
Thank you. I've got that story, Billy. My son was 13 at the time when the Sox won the World Series.
Wow.
So I totally feel for you. The first time I heard that, it made me cry. So I've been able to kind of tighten it up for tonight. But so what I'm going to be talking about is when I wrote my book, 19th Century Baseball in Chicago, I'm an early baseball researcher, pre-National League, and I stumbled across a piece in the Chicago Tribune about the Chicago Blue Stockings. And at the time, I didn't think anything about it. It was really a tough read on the microfiche, and now I'm aging myself. But what I did, it took me a couple of days to do it, but I transcribed this article. I basically did it backwards, word by word, so I can make it out. It was real poor quality. And what it is basically the earliest mention of Negro League baseball in Chicago. The Blue Stockings, up until that time in 1870, they had thought the Chicago Unions of 1887 was the earliest Negro team in Chicago. So this predates that by 17 years. Chicago Unions morphed into the Chicago Columbia Giants, the Union Giants, and eventually the Leland Giants, and then became the Chicago American Giants in 1911. And 1920, the National Negro National League was formed with the American Giants. And I just want to add in there that a buddy of mine, Karan Walker, just started a collegiate woodbat league, the Chicago American Giants, and they're going to be playing here locally at 39th and Wabash. So if you get a chance, go out and see him. So here's the piece from it's an unknown author, from the August 24th, 1870 Chicago Tribune. Baseball from a colored point of view. Match game between American clubs of African descent. Chicago has enjoyed a wide variety of experience in baseball, having witnessed its representation in nearly every possible shape. But not until yesterday had an opportunity to be afforded of seeing how the American citizens of African descent does it. Indeed, there were those so prejudiced as to maintain that the baseball and the suffrage qualification were widely different, insomuch as, while one was a creature of legislative enactment, the other was an utter impossibility on anatomical grounds. In short, and I have to add this in here, there's a lot of words I couldn't read, so I'll just say blank. Blank tender shins and red hot grounders were incompatible. This fallacy, like many another with reference to the same subject, was thoroughly exploded at Ogden Park yesterday afternoon. Our colored brethren can play baseball and do well into the bargain. For some time past, there has existed in Chicago an organization known as the Blue Stockings, which is made up of exclusively of blank athletes who are employed as waiters in the various hotels and restaurants. Under serious difficulties, the necessary practice was obtained owing to an idiosyncrasy of the blank in monopolizing the lakefront as, quotes, white man's park, to the exclusion of colored ball tossers. At last, however, the Blue Stocking Nine had blanked the preliminaries, and on the first of the present month, they accepted the challenge of the Rockford Club of Rockford, which is also made up of amendments, to play a match game. Be it known that the latter are the proteges of the Forest City boys, who have made blank, blank, blank through the details, some sort to the crack amateur nine. In the first game, the Blue Stockings were beaten, and the game yesterday was the second of the series. There were about 400 spectators in attendance, being largely of African persuasion, with about an equal apportionment of the sexes, while a small element of the pure, unadulterated, quote unquote, so-called Caucasians were on hand for the sake of curiosity. With an astounding disregard of the disdained precedents afforded by the White Stockings, amateurs, etc., the rival nines were on hand soon after blank o'clock, and they actually paid so little regard to the baseball usages as to begin the game at the present time, preset time, advertised, vis-a-vis 2:15 o'clock. Such conduct could only be properly punished by expulsion from the state and national associations, to which, unfortunately, neither the Blue Stockings nor the Rockfords belong. They should be admitted at once in order that such reflections upon the practices of their letters might be rigorously dealt with. The Blue Stockings wore a very tasty uniform consisting of a cap of broad blue and white stripes, blue shirt with a neat monogram on the breast, white flannel pants, blue stockings, and regulation shoes. The rig of the Rockfords was made up of a blue cap and a white shirt and blue pants at full length. With the selection of Mr. E.C. Bischoff, late of the Potter Palmers, as umpire, everything was in readiness, and the Blue Stockings, having won the toss, took the field. In each of the first 2 innings, the Rockfords were whitewashed and 1-2-3 ordered by very fine fielding on the part of their opponents, who, when they came to the bat, had no difficulty in hitting for 5 tallies in the first and 3 in the second inning, thus gaining a strong lead, which was rapidly increased as they proceeded. The final results showing 48 for the Blue Stockings, 14 for the Rockfords. The game was usually interesting one throughout, besides being extremely creditable to the Chicago blank, blank, blank in the field, and the bat was fully equal to that of any amateur club in the city. As a catcher, George Brown has no superiors here and few equals, while as a captain, he displayed an energy and judgment and enforced the discipline blank, which a certain high-priced team we know of stands sadly in need. His foul tips, blank, and bounds would have excited Craver's envy, and his throwing to second was such that the plan of stealing from first was altogether abandoned by the other side. The other members of the 9 played uniformly well, as will be seen by the fact that 4 blanks were visited upon the Rockfords, who are good batters. The latter also displayed some fine individual points, but in general, they were outplayed in every respect, and they can go back to Rockford well supplied with reasons why they failed to deserve the $100 promised, which the Forder City Club promised them in the event of their beating the Blue Stockings. To sum up the game in general, it need only to be said that, saving the blank state of color, it was like other well-played games. One peculiarity, however, was noticeable, whether accidental or blank, we don't know. It consisted in an irresistible propensity of tumbling head over heels when in the act of running bases or going for fly catches. Somersaults, which would permanently double up and disable the White Stocking, were counted as nothing by many of the colored hose and resulted in an amusement by the spectators, nothing more.
Nice.
Thank you so much, John. And there's a request from the audience for you, John, to tell us for just a minute about the Negro Leagues getting status as official professional players in games.
Yeah, that's it's really interesting, especially knowing a couple of the Negro Leaguers. You know, I knew Al Sperman and Double Duty Radcliffe, and you know, when I met he died at 103 years old, and I met him when he was 102. So I think of guys like that when this is all happening. Unfortunately, Negro League records and stats and things like that are it's like a needle in a haystack at this point. So there's a lot of real incomplete stats. For example, Satchel Paige, who played with the American Giants in 1930, has been supposedly rumored to have won 800 games in his career. But in official stats, it's only about 205. So there's a lot of barnstorming games. There's only a mention of a game, but like no box scores, things like that.
Thank you.
And I think it's a wonderful thing. And I hope they get Buck O'Neill in next.
Oh, yes.
That's really amazing. That's great stuff, John.
Thanks, Billy.
You know, I was doing a little bit of research, John, just to, I was wondering about, you know, number of inductees in the Hall of Fame, and I came across something. I hope it's just not like blindsiding or anything, but the year that there were the most inductees into the Hall of Fame, it was something like 18, and I think it was in maybe 2006, and 17 of them were Negro League players. Do you know much about that? Is that?
Yeah, that's when they started opening committees up. So, you know, everyone's familiar with like the Veterans Committee, things like that. So there's you know, subsequently a Negro League committee. There's a 19th Century Committee, which I'm a part of. So every year we present, you know, a 19th century player that's we feel has been lost in the ages. And with that Negro League, the initial 17, you know, it was that same type of, you know, kind of empathy of, you know, there's these great ball players out there that need some sort of recognition because, you know, the documents are out there that they're outstanding players, and, you know, even verbal stories and things like that. And I just think it was a long time coming, basically, you know, and I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah, that's really great. It's a great avocation too. I am now going to introduce Barbara Gregorich. Barbara, her baseball writing includes the well-received novel She's On First. After writing the fictional version of Women in Baseball, Barbara began the long job of researching the true story of women who played hardball. The result of that research was Women at Play, the story of women in baseball, published by Harcourt in 1993. Women at Play won the Sabre Macmillan Award for Best Baseball Research of the Year. Barbara's other baseball writing includes Jack and Larry, the true story of Jack Graney and the Cleveland Indians from 1910 to 22, and his bull terrier Larry. It also includes volume 1, 2, and 3 of research notes for Women at Play. Taking a break from baseball writing, Barbara is busy marketing her first YA novel, The F Words, which will be published September 1, 2021, just in time, she hopes, for 1 or 2 Chicago teams to be in first place. That is beautiful and not very Chicagoan of you to be rooting for both teams, by the way.
I'm not from Chicago.
Yeah, but I do want to say this, that I would go to so many games with my son, and he hated when baseball players were booed by someone else, and he couldn't stand if players from any team were booed. And so we would go to Cubs games or Sox games, and he had a great deal of respect for them both. So I'm with you on that, Barbara. We'd love to hear from you now.
What do you want me to read? The Bill Veeck classic or from She's On First?
I think we're going with the classic first.
Okay, great. Okay, Veeck as in Wreck was first published in 1962, and I will be reading from the Cleveland years. Once Bill Veeck became the owner of the Indians, he signed Larry Doby, the first black player in the American League. After he signed Doby, he wanted to sign Satchel Paige. I go way back with Paige. When I was a kid, I used to see him pitch for the Homestead Grays and the Kansas City Monarchs in the old American Giants Park, right across the street from Comiskey Park. I was in the Hollywood Park in 1934 when he pitched that famous 13-inning 1-0 victory against Dizzy Dean, the greatest pitcher's battle I have ever seen. In his younger days, he had blinding speed, but only a little wrinkle of a curve. Satch, in fact, didn't develop a good curve until he was 54 years old. But even in those early days, he had all kinds of different deliveries. He'd hesitate before he'd throw. He'd wiggle the fingers of his glove. He'd wind up 3 times. Satch was always a practicing psychologist. He would get the hitters over anxious, then he'd get them mad. And by the time the ball was there at the plate to be swung at, he'd have them way off balance. His great asset, though, was his control. One of his barnstorming gags was to set up a 1x2 plank behind home plate and stick 4 10-penny nails into it. Then he'd drive the nails into the board by pitching from the ground and never take more than 10 pitches. That's control. Now, although Veeck wanted to sign Satchel Paige to the Indians, Veeck met with opposition from the star shortstop Lou Boudreau, who was also the player manager. Boudreau felt that Paige was over the hill and that Veeck should concentrate on getting a young pitcher. Veeck, feeling that he was right and Boudreau was wrong, arranged to bring Satchel Paige to Cleveland and have him pitch against Boudreau to allow Boudreau to decide. As ridiculous as it was for Satchel Paige to be on trial, that was precisely the situation as he went out to the mound to throw to Boudreau, who at that moment was leading both leagues with a batting average of almost 400. Against Paige, he batted 0. Satch threw 20 pitches. 19 of them were strikes. Lou swung 19 times and he had nothing that looked like a base hit. After a final pop fly, Lou dropped his bat, came over to me and said, Don't let him get away. We can use him. We were at that moment sitting in first place. We had already drawn over 1 million people, and our advance sale alone assured us of reaching 2 million. In the face of all that, an astonishing number of presumably intelligent and literate writers saw the signing of Page not only as a cheap and tawdry box office stunt, but as an admission that I was writing off our pennant chances. One of those writers who saw the signing of Satchel Paige as a cheap and tawdry stunt was J.G. Taylor Spink, the publisher of the Sporting News. And in Vec as in Rec, Bill Vec quotes Spink's editorial. Quote, this is Spink's, to bring in a pitching rookie of Page's age casts a reflection on the entire scheme of operation in the major leagues. To sign a hurler at Page's age is to demean the standards of baseball in the big circuits. Further complicating the situation is the suspicion that if Satchel were white, he would not have drawn a second thought from Vec. End of quote from Spinks. To which Vec concludes, if Satch were white, of course, he would have been in the majors 25 years earlier, and the question would not have been before the House.
That's awesome. You know, was this before or after Vec hired Eddie Geidel to play in that game?
Well, he hired Goodell for the Browns, and I think he managed the Browns or owned the Browns in the early 50s, I think.
Yeah.
I've actually forgotten. I think his progress was from Milwaukee to Cleveland to Chicago. I don't remember.
Yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about the accusation that he might be doing something cheap and tawdry was probably not unfounded.
Yeah. Yes, he was known for his stunts, and but he claims he never, that possibly with the exception of the Browns, the St. Louis Browns, he claims he never did anything like fireworks or the signing of anyone except to help a winning team.
That's great.
And in 1948, the Indians did win the pennant and the series.
Julie, I know you wanted to.
I did want to share a little something that one of the friends who is joining us tonight is Ivan D., whose publishing company put out several Chicago baseball books, including 2 Bill Vec memoirs. One of them being The Hustler's Handbook and the other one being 30 Tons a Day. And also Daniel Levitt's book about the Federal League, the battle that forged modern baseball, the Federal League Challenge and its legacy. That includes really interesting background on the Chicago Whales. And then also in attendance tonight is Randy Richardson, whose novel Lost in the Ivy is a murder mystery set around Wrigley Field. And then he also is the co-author of Cub Sessions, which features a series of famous Cub fans recollecting their experiences with the 2016 championship season. So I was delighted, Barbara, when you chose to read from the Bill Vec memoir, because we knew that Ivan D. was going to be in the audience, and is also very interested in Bill Vec memoirs. So thank you.
You're welcome.
A venerable audience as well as a panel here. And speaking about venerable panelists, Ira Berkow is here. He's a sports columnist and feature writer for the New York Times for 26 years. Ira won a Pulitzer Prize for national reporting. He's the author of 25 books, including the bestsellers Red, a biography of Red Smith, Maxwell Street, Survival in a Bazaar, and a memoir, To the Hoop. His basketball book, The DuSable Panthers, was chosen by the New York Public Library as one of the best books published in 1977. Berkow's work was included in the Best American Sports Writing of the Century. In 1995, New York Magazine, in its Best of New York issue, named Ira the city's outstanding sports writer. In 2014, he received the A.G. Liebling Award for his boxing writing from the Boxing Writers of America Association. He's been cited numerous times for his sports writing by the Associated Press's annual writing contests, as well as those sponsored by football and basketball writers. The Minnie Minoso of baseball writing on other sports, Ira has been anthologized and cited for over 6 decades. He lives in New York City with his wife, Dolly. Ira, it's great to see you.
Nice seeing you. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're doing great.
Okay. You asked me to read from a book I wrote, was published in 2014, and it's called Wrigley Field, and it's a large picture book, but with a lot of text. It's an oral and narrative history of the home of the Chicago Cubs. And I was asked to read a section. I hope it's brief enough for you. And I shall begin. On a summer's late morning in 1971, and in my capacity as a sports writer, I stood behind the Cubs batting cage at Wrigley Field before a game. As the batters went through their routines, a ball that a hitter let pass from the batting practice pitcher rolled under the netting of the cage and to my feet. I picked it up. I cradled the ball in my hand and recalled another summer's late morning in 1951 when I was 11 years old. The day before, my friends and I had maneuvered in the autograph jungle under the cool stands as our Cubs paragons of those days, Andy Pafko, Hank Sauer, Phil Cavaretta, Roy Smalley, Dutch Leonard, Twig Terwilliger, Randy Handsome Ransom Jackson, and the ambidextrous Native American pitcher with the improbable name that we all memorized and loved to roll off our tongues, Calvin Coolidge Julius Caesar Tuskahoma McClish, nicknamed unaccountably Buster. And they emerged like gods from the clubhouse, big and self-assured and leathery tan, hair slicked and redolent of wild root cream oil. It was a team that would wind up in 8th place that year once again, but they were big leaguers and our heroes, last in the National League, but first in our hearts. Roy Johnson, whom everyone called Hard Rock, appeared. He was a tough-looking, craggy-faced coach, but pigeon-toed, which gave away the humor under his gruff veneer. He was in a hurry, he said, and had no time to sign autographs. I continued in hot pursuit. Maybe he changed his mind. No, he persisted. In desperation, he said, "Come to the park tomorrow, kid, and I'll give you a ball," slamming his car door a millimeter from my nose. I believed him. My friends were much too sophisticated. "He was just giving you the slip, dope," one of them said, hardly able to wait for the first crack of dawn through the window shade in my West Side apartment. I did not fall asleep early that night. Armed with my lunch, the usual soft fruit my mother packed, carving a soggy hole in the bottom of a brown paper bag, I was off to Wrigley Field the next morning with my friends. They poked little jokes, even up to the time I left them in the grandstand tour. Stealthy assault in the box seats would come later. I ran down through the shadowy stands as the park began to fill, past vendors hawking peanuts, past the steamy hot dogs broiling succulently on portable grills. I descended to the short red brick barrier along the first base line. Straight out, maybe 10 yards away, was number 42, Hard Rock Johnson, whacking fungos into the bright blue sky. I watched a baseball drop through the clouds, momentarily obscuring part of the Baby Ruth billboard atop the building across the street, get lost momentarily in the white shirts in the sun-splashed bleachers, and finally disappear silently into the dark, outstretched glove of a fielder in front of the the flora on the outfield wall. "Mr. Hard Rock, sir," I called through cupped hands. No answer. I called again. "You promised me a ball yesterday, Mr. Hard Rock." "Sir." Whack went another soaring fungo. "Just a dirty old ball, Mr. Hard Rock," I pleaded. The few adults seated nearby tittered. I'm not certain how long I kept this up, several minutes probably. Soon there was the predictable yank at the collar. I was explaining the situation to the grim usher when there arose the great throaty rumble. "Hey, kid." I turned, and Hard Rock Johnson tossed me a ball in a long underhanded motion. Up the stairs I flew. Wait a minute. My several pals all wanted to see the ball, slightly smudged, but who cared? And I showed my possession to them one by one with me holding the ball tightly. That finished, the ball created an uncomfortable but wholly welcome and secure bulge in the right front pocket of my jeans. Home, I fondled the hard ball with the bumpy seams. I inspected the dirt and grass stains closely, the Spalding trademark in a small drawn baseball, the stars etched alongside official ball National League, and the signature of Ford C. Frick, the league president. I smelled the intoxicating horsehide aroma of the ball, a scent that had not changed 20 years later, that has not changed in 100 years. My friends offered numerous suggestions on how to get the ball clean as new. The one that sold me was to put it in milk. I immersed the ball in a large bowl of milk for 2 days, periodically coming by and rolling it around with my finger to make sure no patch was left unmilked. When I finally removed the ball, it had turned a sickly yellow. I mounted the ball on a shelf in my bedroom for a while, but eventually I took it out to play with it nearby narrow Independence Park. Soon one end came unstitched and grew a flappy tongue. And in time, the whole cover came off and the ball was reduced to a sphere of string. I taped it up and we played with it a little while longer until it seemed to just disintegrate into nothingness. At the batting cage now as a sports writer in 1971 at age 31, I felt the red ridges along the smooth off-white horsehide. It was a ball that had been pretty well pummeled, a ball that I knew would have soon been discarded, but not by me. I slowly tossed the ball into the air a couple of times, smelled it again, then I casually squeezed the ball into the pocket of my slacks and went up to the press box. And if you have, we have 2 more minutes.
We have 2 more minutes for you, Ira.
We do.
Okay.
You just told us he had lunch with J.T. Farrell. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
I took him to a baseball game. There is an addendum to this particular Wrigley Field story. In early April 1986, I read a short obituary in Sporting News that Roy Hard Rock Johnson, age 90, and living in a nursing home in Scottsdale, Arizona, had died. I admit it, this hard-boiled sports writer grew emotional as he read the news, and my thoughts inevitably returned to that summer morning when I was 11 years old and begged Hard Rock Johnson to make good on his promise to give me a baseball, and he did. The obituary related that after his coaching career with the Cubs, Johnson had become a scout for the team in the Southwest, for the Cubs in the Southwest. I called around and got the phone number of his wife, Fanetta. She was 86, and her voice sounded clear over the long distance wire from Scottsdale to Manhattan. Some people called him Hard Rock because he used to work the pitchers so hard as a coach, she said. But most people called him Grumpy, including me and our daughter and even our grandchildren. But living with Roy was wonderful. We were always laughing. He had that grumpy look, and sometimes his temper was short, but usually it didn't mean anything. The couple was from Haleyville, Oklahoma. To avoid becoming a coal miner like his father, Roy Johnson first became a prize fighter. It wasn't long before he understood that this was as tough a way to earn a living as digging coal, and turned to baseball and pitching. He was a big leaguer for one season with Connie Mack's last place Philadelphia A's of 1918. The baseball encyclopedia attests that Johnson won 1 game and lost 5. Vanetta Johnson recalled how Roy would tell her about pitching to Babe Ruth, who was then still primarily a pitcher, but making a reputation as a slugger with the Boston Red Sox. Roy said that Mr. Mack told him, "This guy can hit," recalled Mrs. Johnson. He said, "Don't give him anything, make him bite, or walk him if you have to." Roy threw, and the Babe hit the ball 400 feet into the last row of the bleachers. Roy said, "It might have cleared the Bunker Hill Monument, but at least I didn't walk him." After 1918, Johnson spent many years in the minor leagues in a classic itinerant baseball life, playing, coaching, and then managing in towns like Bisbee, Arizona, Bayard, New Mexico, and Ottumwa, Iowa. In 1935, he was promoted to be a coach with the Cubs. "Roy loved to work," said Mrs. Johnson. He was going out with his cane and sitting on a beach chair to scout high school and college games until just a year or so ago. And you know, when he died, he still had all his teeth. "Still had his teeth," I replied. "That's nice. That's very nice." And I meant it.
That was great, Ira. It's that, I just really like the transition too from the ball of the adult Ira back to the 11-year-old kid. My son had a story like that too, but it wasn't, he just was harassing a player so long. He could tell you exactly who it was, but I can't remember. And the guy just finally looked at him and said, "If I give you this ball, will you shut up?" That's where I thought you were going with that. It's a great, It's a great story, Ira.
Wonderful.
Julia is going to read from her Chicago Classics section, and it's going to be honoring a guy who articulated the mission of the Chicago Classics, Rick Cogan.
Yes,
Ready, Julia?
I am. He has a piece from the Chicago Tribune that's a fantastic opening day piece. It's called "Beer and Baseball Reunited, and It Feels So Good." And I'll read a couple excerpts from that. I highly recommend looking up the entire piece and sitting down with it. But I'll start here. The crack of bat against ball, the roar of the crowd, the smell of freshly cut grass. Another baseball season full of hope arrived earlier in the week. But both of our teams were out of town, and so you did the next best thing and headed to the nearest tavern TV. "Hey, another season," said a friendly face sitting at the bar. "Let me buy you a beer?" "No thanks," you said, "but I will have bourbon." "No beer with baseball?" the man said. "What are you, a communist?" The relationship between baseball and beer is not taken lightly. According to reputable figures, the US ranks 14th on the world's list of beer consumption per capita at 217 12-ounce beer bottles per year. And a considerable portion of our beer is consumed watching baseball. As writer Peter Richmond put it, "Beer needs baseball and baseball needs beer. It has always been thus." For reasons perhaps best explored on a psychiatrist's couch, I don't like beer. But I too get in line during the summer and will have a beer or two whenever I am lucky enough to find myself sitting in the stands at a ballpark, envious of those around me who find beer a regular companion. Then I'll skip to, here is one man's memory. I'll never forget my first Cubs game back in 1983, just after graduating from Purdue and moving to Chicago. It was my first professional sporting event as a legal drinking aged adult. I loved baseball and the classic grandeur of a vintage park. As I walked out of the concourse and saw the intense green of the grass, I was immediately confronted with two amazing options: a hot dog vendor and a beer vendor, both bellowing their wares. "Hot dogs" was followed by 3 clanks of his metal lid, and "beer, beer here" was followed by the tap, tap, tap of the bottle opener on the plastic tray. As I found my seat, I had my first sip of that Budweiser. The crisp bite of cold lager imprinted my taste buds, followed closely by that first bite of stadium hot dog with mustard and sweet relish. Then a second, bigger drink of my Budweiser. The harmony was incredible. Suddenly, the organ sprang to life and the Cubs came running onto the field. It is now 33 years later, and this man, whose name is Jeffrey Goad, has recently become a Damon's beer sommelier, which means that he has been certified by the Siebel Institute in Chicago to consult people and businesses on all things beer. He goes on, at a game last season, July 3rd to be precise, and this article was written in 2016, so he's talking about 2015. I was in the reopened center field bleachers at Wrigley when my wife and I spotted my old friend, Doug Sohn, the former proprietor of that recently shuttered legendary hot dog mecca called Hot Doug's. Sohn was at the park promoting his gourmet dogs, as he will be doing this season as well. They are all named after former Cubs players. I was excited, of course, says Goad, and then my eye caught the logo of Goose Island Brewery on the tap handle at the counter. I saw Green Line burnished into the wood. At the time, it was a draft-only American Pale Ale available only in the Chicago area. And there it was at Wrigley. So Goad bought a Green Line and a Dave Kingman hot dog. As I sat down with my wife, I took a long sip of this amazing beer and my first bite of that gourmet dog, he says. I was still instantly transported back to that first baseball, beer, and food pairing. It was so visceral that I could still taste that tart green apple of the beer and the sweet but tart flavors of mustard and relish on the dog. I'll never forget those baseball firsts. Of course, not all beer baseball experiences have this sort of impact, and not all such encounters take place at ballparks. Baseball season also finds taverns crowded with those watching games. These crowds are usually knowledgeable and passionate about, and baseball brings out the best and worst in barflies. The best being blind hope, and the worst being the desire to start silly arguments. Jeff McGill recently retired after spending nearly 35 years behind the bar at Billy Goat Tavern, home of the lengthy and durable Curse, in its subterranean quarters under the formal 430 North Michigan Avenue address. McGill has, with the behind-the-bar observational skills of a philosopher, this to say: those of us that remember baseball referred to as America's pastime can include beer at the old ball game or at the old tavern as tantamount to apple pie for dessert. In the process, beer gets a decided public stamp of approval. With that comes a grand sense of affiliation, a collective abandonment of inhibition, enabling a greater expression of fan-generated exhortation. Of course, some in the park and in the tavern fans overdo it, but no more than on St. Patrick's Day or New Year's Eve. So watch yourselves about that abandonment of inhibition. We live in politically correct times and don't suffer the overserved any more kindly than we would this admission from former Cubs great Hack Wilson. I've never played drunk. Hungover, yes, but never drunk. And then there was Harry. If you need the last name, you might need to move on to another story. Harry used to say, not only do I like to go to bars because I like to drink, I do like to drink, but I go because who do you see there? Baseball fans. There are fans who will remember that when he was broadcasting games for the White Sox from 1971 to 1981, his trademark exclamation, "Holy cow," was actually followed by another 4 words, as in, "Holy cow, have another Falstaff, folks." It is safe to say that no announcer in sports history has been more closely associated with beer than Harry. In his long career, he was a tireless salesman of several beers, but also an ardent consumer. Harry died in 1998, but lives on at the Harry Carey's restaurant Oases and in a statue outside Wrigley. In one hand is a microphone. The other is empty most of the time, except when fans place empty beer cans in it, which they do often before games and afterward, win or lose.
That's great. John, the first time I met you, I think, was at Skylark, if I'm not mistaken. And you've worked with beer, right? Aren't you a beer guy, John?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I've been. I was a founding partner in Three Floyds. And when I was younger, like in my 20s, I started a distributorship, bringing in like craft beer from all over the country. So I'm no longer in the beer end of it. I'm kind of more in spirits and stuff at this point. I'm matured, but you know, it's my whole life has been beer and baseball. once I blew my elbow out pitching, I kind of gravitated like, well, what else do I know? I know beer.
John, are you're about to read something from your Chicago Classic selection?
Yes, I've got. We all know about. Well, we might not all know about it, but Cap Anson, who had played for the White Stockings and through the 1870s through 1890s, has basically become the main reason for the color line in baseball. So in 1884, he refused to play. The Cubs or the White Stockings were barnstorming. We're supposed to play a team from Toledo, and the catcher was black, and that was Moses Fleetwood Walker, and that was 1884. In 1885, there was what was called the Gentleman's Agreement. That was never written down, but from that point on, black players were not allowed to play. So the selection I have is written by Ray Schmidt, and Ray Schmidt talks about the early city. There was what was called the City League back in the early 1900s, and he wrote a piece. It was called "The Golden Era of the Golden Age of Baseball" in the Chicago Historical Society, Chicago History magazine. So I'm going to read a little piece from this. Let's see. I got to find my place. I'm sorry. The Chicago Semi-Pro ranks of 1907 also featured two of the greatest names in all of baseball history. Adrian Cap Anson of pre-1900 Chicago National League fame, and Andrew Rube Foster, the legendary Negro League player. Foster, a top pitcher with the best black professional teams in the East, brought his baseball talent to Chicago to play for the Leland Giants. In 1907, Anson, out of baseball since 1898, had been pressured out of his job as the city clerk of Chicago during an employee payroll scandal. In an attempt to capitalize on his popularity and raise some much-needed money, the former National League grade organized the top-quality semi-pro baseball team in 1907, which he called Anson's Colts. After watching from the bench that first season, Anson returned to the field with his ball club in 1908. Now 57 years old, he played very well at first base in 22 games. Two of those games in 1908 carried stunning significance for baseball history, considering that Anson is blamed by many for the Major League's color barrier that extended until 1947, a full 25 years after his death. In games played in Chicago on August 22nd and September 6, 1908, Cap Anson, who allegedly had refused to play against black players during his major league days, went the distance at first base for his Colts against the all-black Leland Giants team, the latter game going 13 innings. The semi-pro baseball season of 1909 was notable for the long-awaited return of a formal Chicago City League schedule and pennant race. A 16 league was formed that year that included the Logan Squares, the Gunthers, Anson's Colts, the West Ends, a team from Milwaukee, and most surprising of all, the Leland Giants. At least three of these ball clubs were clearly in the category of professional teams when judged by where they were playing, who was on the rosters, and comments of various baseball observers. During the 1909 season, semi-pro baseball in the city had clearly reached another peak period in popularity. The Chicago League drew large crowds every weekend, and the newspapers provided extensive coverage of the teams. Large-sized pictures, game stories, and even player batting averages gave visual endorsement to the popularity of semi-pro baseball in the city. A rousing pennant race in the City League between the Leland Giants, Logan Squares, and the Gunthers didn't hurt fan interest either. The Lelands finally pulled away to win the title. Meanwhile, the Spaldings won a playoff series from the River Forest to gain the championship of the city's traveling teams. Then, in a legendary series of games, the Cubs tangled with the Leland Giants in a 3-game series played in mid-October. Although the National League club swept all 3 of the hard-fought games, 2 of the outings were decided by 1-run margin. In October 1909, an article about this recently concluded City League season ran in the Chicago Tribune. The writer commented that while undoubtedly it is galling to many persons to see a colored 9 take honors from 5 white teams, the Leland Giants are entitled to a place in the league by their drawing powers. The article went on to describe how the Lelands had such talent that was at least 5 of them would be in the major leagues if white. The sports writer also mentioned that the Chicago League teams included at least a dozen players who were earning between $150 and $200 a month for playing weekend games. The Chicago League would return in 1910 with a 16 pennant race, but manager Billy Neeson had withdrawn his Gunther's team before the season as a result of scheduling disputes with other semi-pro team owners. Many of the players from the legendary 1909 Leland Giants were now playing for the Chicago Giants. That team replaced the Lelands as a member of the Chicago League. The West Ends narrowly edged past the Black Ball Club for the pennant that September. The Chicago semi-pro season of 1910 also established the lasting place in baseball history when the Logan Squares and Roger Park teams played a night game on August 27th at the new Comiskey Park at 35th Street and Shields. This was baseball's first successful night game ever, and the 3,500 fans marveled at the playing conditions as the Logans won 3-0. By 1911, the golden era of Chicago baseball was over. Although it wasn't clearly evident at the time, Jimmy Callahan's return to the good graces of Major League Baseball helped to bring this about. In 1911, he rejoined the White Sox as a player and then became their manager in 1912. Without his driving competitive and promotional skills, the semi-pro clubs became significantly less aggressive in their recruitment of major league quality players and in the playing of exhibitions against touring major or minor league teams. Also in 1911, Rube Foster left the Leland Giants and organized the all-black team that he called the American Giants. And this is American Giants hat.
Fabulous. Thank you, John. No,
You're welcome.
That was wonderful. And now we'd like to welcome back Barbara Gregorich, who will be reading a short selection from her novel, She's on First.
Thank you. The section I'm reading from occurs after 100 games. The novel is about Linda Sunshine, the first woman major leaguer. Novels are fiction, and she plays for the Chicago Eagles, owned by Al Mowerinsky. The scene takes place 100 games into the season. There has just been a fight in the Chicago Eagles dugout, and the fight was caused by racist remarks and sexist remarks. Al Mowerinsky, the owner, is in the stands watching the game after the players were patched up and sent back out on the field. On the surface, things had looked, if not good, at least like they were holding together as the Eagles moved toward second place. Al now realized that only the drive itself was holding them together, centrifugal force. He remembered being a kid carrying buckets of water to help his father, who was mixing mortar. Al would swing the half-full bucket in a large arc over his head, down again to his knees, up, down, his arms spinning round like a windmill's. The water would stay in the bucket until he slowed down. Then, if he couldn't stop the slowing bucket fast enough in an upright position, the water would come pouring down on top of him. So would his father, who needed the water. The Eagles reminded him of that. What was holding them in the bucket, despite the sloshing, was the speed and direction in which they were moving. Any slowdown could cause a downpour. Crowder hit a hard grounder that the second baseman booted. Crowder was out anyway, enough safe at third. Icemonger stepped up, and Al sensed the exodus to the refreshment stands. The inning ended with Icehead's strikeout. I then moved to the Philadelphia half of the inning. The next Philly batter hit a hard grounder that tore a divot out of the infield, then scooted along the ground like a torpedo toward the shortstop. Linda charged the ball, smothered it in her glove, scooped it out, and threw to Nuff. From where he sat, Al could see the dirt that she scooped out of her glove with the ball. A small cloud of it seemed to float around her and lazily drift back down to the infield. The runner was out, the inning over. The play reminded him of the photograph. He had wanted one, not on his desk, not in his office where he hung the team's pictures, but at home. Al could have had any of hundreds of pictures of her, but he chose this one. The photo showed her throwing the ball to first. Infield dirt was pouring out of her gloved hand in a small stream. An aura of infield dust surrounded the ball. The sun glinted off the minute particles of dirt and dust, making them sparkle. The effect was that of looking at a shortstop through a mist, a mixture of sunlight and dirt. You couldn't even tell until you looked closely who the shortstop was. After he chose the photo, he became aware that it was symbolic to him. The more he thought about it, the more he realized it expressed his philosophy. You had to sparkle through the dirt. The Eagles tried to sparkle through the dirt, but didn't succeed. Philadelphia took the game 3-2. There was no such thing as an undefeated baseball team, so Al didn't exactly feel the spinning water come pouring down with this loss, but he felt the threat of it over his head. A baseball team would get nowhere when it wasn't a team, when the players were more concerned with their own problems than with the team's problems.
Well done, Barbara.
Thank you.
There's a moment in A River Runs Through It where the sun is being described in fly fishing with this kind of aura, kind of a halo around him that I pictured as you're reading that. It's really nice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And now we're going to re-welcome Ira Berkow back. He's going to read a little something from J.T. Farrell's 1957 book.
I'm going to read the first part of James T. Farrell's My Baseball Diary. And it's essentially the introduction to it. It was published in 1957. And I got to know James T. Farrell. He moved to New York, and I took him to a baseball game, the Mets game, which he enjoyed, and he was very knowledgeable. But in our conversation, he's famous for his trilogy of Studs Lonigan, of course. And at one point I said to him, Jim, you've had some great reviews and you've had some negative reviews. So how do you balance that off with yourself? He said, well, if it's a positive review, I try not to get too high. And if it's a negative review, I try not to get too low. And this was a cliche. And there was a pause. And then he said, but there are a couple of editors I like to punch right in the damn nose. Okay, that's from a real writer, I guess. But anyway, the opening of this book, My Baseball Diaries, and of course, he grew up in Chicago on the South Side. And he writes in the introduction to this, these are some of the happiest memories of my life. They will, I hope, explain why I have loved baseball and remain interested in it. As I wrote this piece, I thought of the boys I played with, of the long days when the world was baseball. I remember a great day in 1910. I was 6 years old. My grandfather was ill, and usually he would be on a small cot in the dining room of our apartment on Indiana Avenue. I was dreamily playing with my baseball pictures. In those days, pictures of ball players were inserted in packages of cigarettes. I recall one brand in particular, Sweet Caporals. My brother Earl had a large collection of these pictures, and I, following his example, had managed to get a sizable one of my own. Earl gave me pictures of which he had duplicates. My aunt and my uncle got others for me. I was not able to read, but I knew the name of every player on my pictures. Some of these names still stand out significantly in my mind. Among them, Topsy Hartzell, who I never heard of, and Joe Tinker. The picture of Tinker showed him with his bat in hand against a dull purplish background. In some ways, the picture of Joe Tinker was associated with my older brother. Also, I often had an optical illusion when I looked at it. It seemed to me that the handle of the bat was curved, shaped like a cane. And while I knew that this was not correct, I would often see the curved handle of the bat when I looked at the picture. At times, I was unable to erase this illusion from my mind. It disturbed me. But on this particular day, I was playing with my pictures, imagining and absorbed. Suddenly, I heard that Father Dondeville had come to see my grandfather. He was my grandfather's friend and also mine. This sick call of Father Dondeville is one of my important early baseball memories. He was a big, jolly, rather plump and understanding priest. I liked the friendliness of his voice. I believe that he liked me. He paid attention to me and flattered me in the way he asked questions about baseball and my pictures. He also asked me to show him how the various players batted and talked to me about the game. I had not then, of course, learned to imitate the stances of the players accurately, but I did it nonetheless. He held the cards in his hands and asked me who each player was, and I identified the players correctly and according to the teams on which they played. I told him what players batted and threw right-handed or left-handed. All of this was knowledge that I had absorbed and heard mainly from my older brother. The priest was amazed, and his compliments pleased me very much. He gave me the nickname of Young Ty Cobb. Later, in 1911, 1912, during my first grade year, and subsequently, until he was sent to a new parish about 1913, he used to visit our classroom at Corpus Christi High School at 49th and Grand Boulevard, now South Parkway. He called me by my first name, and I would stand up and then answer baseball questions in class, and would again imitate big league players at bat before the entire class. I was always thrilled. These visits of Dr. Donneville's were some of the brightest occurrences of my early childhood. In 1912, my Uncle Tom bought me a blue baseball suit. I liked it that the suit was blue. During those days, the White Sox wore blue suits on the road. Father Donneville arranged to take a picture of me in my suit, which he did in front of the parish house on Grand Boulevard. He had me squat like a catcher with my hat turned around. I had a boy's catcher's mitt, which cost about 25 cents. The picture is now lost, but I have frequently wished that I still had it. At home, the grown-ups laughed about the picture, but I believe that it gave me great importance. In the picture, my expression was so serious as to be funny. My love of baseball originally goes back to those days. The pictures of players which came with packages of cigarettes, pictures of Topsy Hartzell in an athletics uniform, of Joe Tinker with the Cubs after swinging, of Ty Cobb in a gray suit and against a yellow background, of Nap LaJoy, of Cy Young and others were my introduction to our national game and the beginning of my lifelong interest in baseball. James T.
Oh, terrific. Thank you, Ira.
I just want to say, I know Don's going to close this out, but I just want to say I'm honored to be invited to this Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, Chicago Classics, and to be on this panel with some great writers and some old friends and some new friends, and a blurbist for one of my books, Ira. It was great to meet you all. And there's also a bunch of, I feel a little bit embarrassed to have so many like great baseball people and writers on the panel and in the audience. So I appreciate being a part of it though.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you guys and Chicago Literary Classics and for appearing. And I also want to give a shout out to one of my all-time great publishers, Ivan D.
And I would also like to thank you for the invitation and for the participation. It was a lot of fun.
Don, take it away.
Yeah, for sure. I've been trying to unmute. Yeah, it was a joy, and I feel honored to be on this panel. I've known Billy since high school, and it's just kind of, we've come full circle between Father Sheridan's speech class and the Stack the Deck English book that we both had to use. We both done good, Billy.
Well, I'm Don Evans. I'm the founding executive director of the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. Happy opening day, everybody. This is always one of the most exciting days of the year for me. And as a Cubs fan, it was a lot more exciting 7 hours ago than it is after watching that disaster this afternoon. For you White Sox fans, you still got the opener coming up in not quite an hour. I wore my Cubs gear today. I was telling the panelists earlier that I've got my Andy Pafko jersey on. I got my Cubs hat here. I don't know if you can see it. Andy Pafko signed the back, and I was at this old timers convention. I had done a Chicago Cubs anthology, so I brought my jersey, I wore it, and I asked Andy to sign it. And Andy was he had to be mid-80s at that point, and he was very shaky. You know, his hand was going like this with the marker, and I thought, oh shit, you know, he's just gonna ruin my jersey, you know, because he's doing this. And so he's shaking, and he's got this big red marker, and he's doing this. And then he signed it, and I looked at it when I got home, and it's perfect Andy Pafko signature, just a beautiful signature. And so now I can never wash it though, because I didn't think of that. This is the only jersey I ever have had. But in any event, the panelists tonight, thank you so much for being here. I'm big fans of their work. I was talking to John Freyer on the phone the other day, and I was thinking we should just have him talk for an hour. Ira, I've been a huge fan of his work for so many years. I first came across his book, Maxwell Street, a long time ago when I was an undergraduate at the University of Illinois. And from there, I started to explore his other work. He's a brilliant writer. Barbara Gregorich, I love her novel that she read from tonight and so much other. And Billy and Julia, all of these are very good friends, great writers, and we're lucky to have them tonight. Chicago Literary Hall of Fame, you go to our website, chicagoliteraryhof.org. You can find the vault of our Chicago classics. Rich Kono, I want to thank tonight. He's been doing the tech support. He will edit these a little bit and then get them on the website. And so you'll be able to watch them. And thanks to everybody here. I'd start to name all of my friends and supporters of the Hall of Fame that are in the audience, but there's so many of them, from Bill Young to Paul DeRica to Don DeGrazia to Peggy Conlin to Susan Messer. There's so many there. Thank you guys for showing up. I apologize for us running a little bit over. Rich was going to try to bring everybody up so we can give all the readers applause. Rich, how's that going?
Yeah.
If they unmute, you should be able to hear them.
Okay, so everybody now in the audience, if you unmute, let's finish by giving a big round of applause to our readers and hosts tonight. I'm really grateful to them tonight, so thank you.
Yay!
Yeah.
Play ball! Play ball!
Play ball.
Play
All
ball,
right.
yeah.
Thank you, everybody, and good night from the Chicago Literary Hall of Fame. And go to our website. You can look at the blog there. You can look at the Chicago Classics. You can look at our events. So everything you need is there. Thank you again to everybody that participated tonight and everybody that attended. Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you, John.
Good
Night,
night.
all.
Good
Good
night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very
much, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
So much fun. Thank you.
Great evening.
Very interesting.